This is Standing Watch. And now, Evangelist Norbert Link.
Well, greetings everyone and welcome back to our Standing Watch program. The United States Supreme Court issued a ruling regarding Donald Trump's revised Muslim travel ban. And I will explain in a moment why I am using those words. And of course, both sides declared victory, but in reality, both sides were losing. Now, when I started reading the summaries in the press, I realized that I needed to actually go to the decision itself because not everything which was written there sounded accurate. And here is actually a copy of this decision, which I read very carefully. Now, based on this, let me just read to you a few summaries from some newspapers and magazines and internet providers. Here is one by the Washington Post dated June 26 saying this. The Supreme Court agreed on Monday to allow a limited version of President Trump's ban on travelers from 6 mostly Muslim countries to take effect and will consider in the fall, which is in October, the president's broad powers on immigration matters, but it may be moot by then, in a case that raised fundamental issues of national security and religious discrimination. The decision is being described as follows then by the Washington Post. The court made an important exception. It said the ban may not be enforced against foreign nationals who have a credible claim of a bona fide relationship with a person or entity in the United States. And I'll talk about that in a moment, what it means. But I also will tell you, my friends, why this is so important in regards to the future. We are standing watch. We are watching carefully what is happening in this country and around the world in the light of biblical prophecies. And we are telling you what is prophesied to come. And this is very, very important because it goes far beyond just some Muslim countries. Now, the article goes on to say that the action means that the administration may impose a 90-day ban on travelers from Libya, Iran, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen, and the original version included Iraq, but that was later dropped, and a 120-day ban on all refugees entering the United States, with the exceptions of this bona fide relationship noted by the court. Now, in clarifying this requirement of a bona fide relationship, the Huffington Post added on June 26, the court's order said that a close familiar relationship, and I repeat this, familial relationship, it's also familiar, but it has to be a family relationship, is required for individuals who wish to live with or visit a family member. When the relationship is with an entity or university, it must be formal, documented, and formed in the ordinary course. As an example, they said, students and lecturers would have a formal relationship, as would someone who accepted employment with an American company. But it would not apply to someone who enters into a relationship simply to avoid the executive order. Now, the New York Times provided further information on June 26, saying this. The court in effect said that foreigners with ties or relationships in the United States would not be prohibited from entering the country, but those applying for visas who had never been here or had no family, business, or other ties could be prohibited. The court said the distinction should be easy to administer, but 3 judges disagreed with that, saying no, it's not easy, and they would have pleaded for reinforcing the ban completely and totally without any exceptions. JTA. Now listen carefully, my friends, because that's where I'm going also in this program. They wrote on June 26, HIAS, H-I-A-S, formerly known as the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, called the announcement mixed news. The group's CEO and president, Mark Hatfield, criticized the fact that those without such bona fide ties, and this includes refugees, could now be barred from entering the United States. Certainly in the case of refugees, this order will have a tragic toll on those who have fled for their lives and played by our rules to find refuge in the United States. HIAS was founded in the 1880s as a resource for newly arrived Jewish immigrants, this article said. Now let me point out what this means. First of all, this 16-page decision by the Supreme Court states that generally the President has a right to prohibit certain people from entering the United States, saying, and I quote, unadmitted and non-resident alien has no constitutional right of entry to this country. The Supreme Court also said that in the case of a refugee lacking this bona fide relationship with a particular person, and I quote, the balance tips in favor of the government's compelling need to provide for the nation's security, close quote. And it's up to the government to decide what that means. Now, with this highly questionable rationale, if you go back in time, thousands upon thousands of Jews were barred from entering the United States prior to and during World War II and were murdered in Nazi concentration camps later on. Now, you might say this just refers to 6 predominantly Muslim countries. But quite frankly, it's not limited, because now the green light was given to the President to enter whatever ban he wants to against whoever he wants to, if he follows those guidelines. Now let me also point out this, first of all. This decision completely, the United States Supreme Court's decision, completely failed to address a very important legal argument. I read the entire decision, nothing is in there, and that has to do with the fact that this was clearly, in the mind of the President, a Muslim travel ban, and that would be unconstitutional on its face. Now that was the basis for some of those decisions which were rendered by inferior courts, so to speak, and the United States Supreme Court didn't even address it. Now let me read to you from an article by the Chicago Tribune on May 8, 2017, saying this: a challenge to President Donald Trump's revised travel ban appears to hinge on whether a federal appeals court agrees that the Republicans' past anti-Muslim statements can be used against him. And it was the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, a conservative court, not a quote-unquote liberal court like the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals. It was the 4th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals which wrestled Monday with whether the court should look beyond the text of the executive order to comments made by Trump and his aides on the campaign trail and after his election in order to determine whether the policy illegally targets Muslims. And that is the most important issue in the whole case, said Judge Robert King. And the panel of 13 judges peppered both sides with tough questions, because a federal judge in Maryland, who blocked the travel ban in March, cited Trump's comments as evidence that the executive order is a realization of his repeated promise to bar Muslims from entering the country. And then they pointed out actually that this statement was still on the White House website. Now subsequently, and that's important now, the 4th Circuit Court of Appeals concluded that the travel ban violated the First Amendment. In other words, that it was a Muslim travel ban, which was unconstitutional. And so the court barred enforcement of the ban via a preliminary injunction. So the Supreme Court completely and totally ignored that. And so the decision and the U.S. immigration law on which it is based are bound to create strong dissent within the United States and, of course, and all over the world, as the decision prevents any bar under the exceptions, taking those exceptions out of it. What it means, President Trump can prevent anyone lacking any bona fide relationship from entering the United States, including tourists, as well as refugees fleeing for their lives. And this can go much broader than just some Muslim countries. It could include countries like Germany and France, something which candidate Trump already said he might very well have to include in the future, as barring entering the United States. And of course, the relationship between the United States and Europe, especially Germany and France, is already incredibly strange, incredibly bad, and it's bound to get worse. And this could actually happen. I have received inquiries from Germany right now. People asking me, should we quickly try to come into the United States now, because maybe next year it's too late. Now, first I would have said, no, I don't think so. I think it's not too late next year. Now, I'm not sure. Now, I am not sure. President Trump has an awful reputation worldwide. Flipboard wrote on June 25 that 74% of those surveyed in a new poll said they have no confidence in Trump. Arrogant, intolerant, dangerous. These are all traits that a sizable majority of global respondents said describes the US president. Now, of course, some say he is a strong leader and he is charismatic, but then others feel he is not and he doesn't care for the people. Now, there were 5 points which were asked regarding what most people feel they strongly disagree with. And guess what they were? Withdrawing from the Iran deal, restricting travelers from some Muslim majority countries, then withdrawing from climate change, trade agreements, and building a wall along the border with Mexico. These were all equally unpopular globally. And if this travel ban is now enlarged, which it could very well be, towards other countries, imagine what that will do. Now, just this morning, further guidelines came in from the White House, and Bloomberg wrote on June 28 that a diplomatic cable outlining the guidelines defines close family that would be allowed U.S. entry as a parent, including a parent-in-law, spouse, child, adult, son or daughter, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, sibling, whether whole or half, and including step relationships. But what would not be included is grandparents, grandchildren, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, cousins, brothers-in-law, and sisters-in-law, fiancés, and any other extended family members, or I should say fiancés, and other extended family members. That's a big category of people who would not be allowed, who are not allowed at this point to come in as tourists or as refugees. And you see, if this is going to be enlarged, then you have perhaps distant relatives in Germany or in France which will not be allowed to come in. And you might say, oh, this is not going to happen. Well, the Bible tells you that the relationship between the United States of America and Europe will be so bad that ultimately a war will ensue between those two power blocks. And I'm talking about nuclear war. Now, obviously, when that happens, nobody's allowed to come in. But even prior to that, many may not be allowed to come in, and we need to stand watch, because these are important developments. These are developments in the light of biblical prophecy which show you how close we are to what the Bible calls the Great Tribulation. I hope you understand. I hope you are awake. I hope you realize the difficult times which are ahead of us. And I hope you understand also that this is prophesied to happen because God is carrying out a plan down here below. And the end of it is, and that is the good news, the return of Jesus Christ to make an end to this madness which we are encountering today, and to make an end to all human rule. No matter who is ruling right now, in what country, it is going to end. And you can thank God for that. Thank you very much for listening. This is Norbert Link for the Standing Watch program.
Standing Watch is a presentation by the Church of the Eternal God, P.O. Box 270519, San Diego, California 92198. More information is also available at our website, eternalgod.org.